The Captain's Log Radio, with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome to the Captain's Log Radio Show. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. So glad to have you here on the Outdoor Radio Network. And again, after we finish the show here on the Outdoor Radio Network, you can listen to the Captain's Log Radio on Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeart, and of course on YouTube Podcast. All you got to do is go into YouTube and search the Captain's Log TV. You'll pull up our channel. You'll find our podcast. You can watch everything there. And while you're at it, hey, go and give us a like, a follow, a comment, a subscribe on all of our platforms at the Captain's Log TV. Today with me, a really fishy dude, the man, the myth, the legend, Captain Justin McGrade out of Columbia, South Carolina. Dude, what's going on, bro? How are you, my friend?
I am great. How are you doing? You got me hyped up with that introduction, dude.
Dude, listen, you are always hyped up. I tell you, when we were fishing, that was probably one of my favorite parts of our day, is the energy that we had on the boat. And even though we had to work and grind, that energy just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then we nailed the one we were looking for, and it was just like, woo, we were pumped up. So tell me about your fishing, man. It is middle of December. I was there. I want to say it was March. Okay.
March
So
14th.
what's going on now? And tell me where you're at. Tell everyone at home where you're at, what kind of fishing you do, and where you do your fishing.
Well, we're in Columbia, South Carolina. As everybody knows, on the East Coast, we've recently had Helena come through and really put a hurting on things. And that honestly has really slowed the fishing down this winter. It's not that the fishing's not good, but just people have a lot of going on. There are a lot of repairs, a lot of damage. So, I mean, as much as they probably need to go fishing for some therapy, right? Some on the water time, it's just, it's just not that time right now for anybody up here. So this year has been really slow. I've been working on some things. I do some welding and working on some boats to get turned out. But the fishing's still good. The stripers left, October. And that's, stripers are my bread and butter. Stripers are like what I've done my whole life. So that is my confidence fish, right? Now I love the smallmouth fishery we have, which is what I do year round. And I do have some trips coming up here recently that we're going for the smallmouth. And the water levels have been kind of up and down. We've had a little bit of rain here, so they've spiked up here recently, but honestly, the water levels this year have been really good, and the fish have really active, really feeding. And the big fish come out in the winter, which that's what I love. I love when we can go catch, a 5-pound, 6-pound smallmouth.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Footballs.
yeah, there's no better reward. Now we're not like Northern Lake or anything world known, but we have them and we catch them. So it's you're not going to catch 30 of them. Go ahead.
So tell me exactly where you're fishing. When we were together, we started on the Congaree.
Correct.
And the Congaree, whatever you say it, I'm saying that
yeah,
wrong.
Congaree, yeah.
Congaree flows up into the Saluda, and then there's another one.
Yeah, well, it's our tail race, the Saluda, coming out of Lake Murray, which is fished on the bass circuits and things like that. It flows into the downtown area of Columbia, and then you have the Broad River coming from the upstate, and that meets in the confluence downtown, and then forms Congaree.
And so this time of year, you're getting, because that's where we fish for stripers, but this time of year, you're focused in there for your smallmouth.
Yeah, the downtown area is always a good go-to for me, just because that's my backyard. I have hit and seen every rock possible out there. So I know every nook and cranny of that place, and I know how to navigate it the best, and I can always put the boat in the best position and give us the best shot. However, where I do smallmouth fish is a 22-mile stretch of river above Columbia where we have a non-water controlled dam. And above that's 22 miles to the next dam, which is Parr Reservoir. And a lot of that, like almost all of it's private. So where I put in at is actually private land. I have a buddy here in town. He owns Congaree Bait and Tackle, Jamie Oswald, best guy known to man. Like he helps me out so much, but he lets me put in on his property in the Columbia area, and that allows me to navigate those waters. Now, it's not easy. That river is probably one of the toughest rivers ever to navigate because the elevation change is not as drastic as it is in the downtown area. So when you're reading water, it reads totally different. I mean, there's rocks right under the surface, but they're not telling you the signs, or the water's not showing you they're there. So like navigating that's a different world up there, making it a little more extreme,
Oh,
needless
well,
to
that was
say.
one of the things I've had. I was talking over the weekend. I was at the Skinny Water Culture Christmas party over in Clearwater Beach, Florida. And I was actually, Coyote Boatworks had a couple of boats there. There was another boat company, and I don't remember the name of them, but they make aluminum skiffs. Very similar to what we fished out of with you. And I was telling the guys, your boat, the way you built your boat, you have a front deck, and on that front deck is your steering wheel, your controls. That's where you're running the boat. And it's so helpful because you're so elevated and you're at the front of the boat. You're able to see these rocks. Like I'm talking, there are boulders in the water. If you're listening at home and you've ever been whitewater rafting, that's what it that's what it was like. Now think about for
For sure.
me, I have never been to where we fished for our episode. So when I saw that, I was like, whoa, that's not what I was expecting. Like
And then
we're
it's
not,
so cool. And it's so
yeah,
cool how we
it's
started in the Congaree though, and it was all sand. So we go from our coastal plain to our Piedmont plain, right? And we have that elevation change, and we have our fault line, which creates the rocks. So you
yeah.
go from one world of just like looking like a regular river, sandy, just shoals, whatever, no rock really. And then all of a sudden it's nothing but rock.
And if you don't know, if you want to visit that area and you're thinking about taking your own boat, just leave it in the parking lot and call Justin because listen, if you don't know where you're going, you are going to have problems. You are going to hit the boat. And Justin's boat is an aluminum boat built for this with a jet drive outboard. One of the coolest things for me was we drove the boat up on top of one of these boulders. And by we drove, I mean Justin drove his boat up on top of the boulder, kept the boat in gear because water's flowing by. That whitewater rapid is like running through, and boat's in gear. And he's like, all right, bro, go ahead and pick up a rod. Time to fish. I'm thinking, what in the world are we doing, man? This is crazy. But that's how you keep your boat in position. There's only so much you can do with the trolling motor, but when there's rocks everywhere, when you're on a boulder, you're not throwing a trolling motor in the water. You're not going to spot lock. So it was a very, very unique experience for me. Now, you had mentioned the dam. We had fished at the dam. So you're talking on the other side of the dam,
Correct. Yep.
going forward for 22 miles is where, and we didn't do that part, but that's where you find a lot of
And that's a
your
that's a
stripe or
straight
your mark
smallmouth. That's straight
smallmouth.
smallmouth country only. Like the
Mm.
stripers do not go up. We have a fish ladder in that dam. Um, the smallmouth will use it, and other species will use it. And some stripers they've documented because they have students from USC in the biology, department, I guess, marine biology studying there. And so they'll sit and they have a glass viewing area, and they'll count the species that go up the step and come down.
Huh.
Um, so they do see stripers move up there, but that water gets way too warm. And that's what's a big shock to everybody about smallmouth is like that water temperature will get like in the high 80s and like even probably low 90s. I don't know. It gets
This
super
time of
hot
year? Or are you talking
in the
about like
summer,
the
in the
summertime?
summer,
Okay.
and it
Okay. That
gets
makes
so
more
low
sense.
flow that there's not a lot of flow in the rocks. It's really shallow, and so it was a big shock that the smallmouth when they did this stocking program back in the 80s that they survived, and self-sustain and
Mm.
but they thrive in that water. Our biggest smallmouth is 6.99 on paper, based off of a 17-inch girth and a 22-inch measurement.
Wow.
That was in my first year guiding.
Hmm.
I'm not that good, Jonathan. I will be the first to tell you. So if I've already caught one in that 7 pound range, the who knows what's in that water, right? I feel
Right.
state record coming like at some point for sure because it's
Huh.
such a pristine, you know, mile stretch of water that
Hmm.
nobody has access to. Nobody puts pressure on these fish. Like they
Hmm.
just get to eat, survive, and grow. I mean, and
Well,
they have a lot of forage, you
well,
know, to choose from.
having that access, man, what a blessing. What are you throwing at these fish? We got 2 minutes left in this segment. What are you throwing at these fish?
My favorite thing to chase, I'm a power fisherman. As you
Ah,
probably picked
love
up
that.
on, like
Yeah,
I like to move. I don't
me
like to
too.
sit there and force feed. So obviously your top water, the Chapo, the Berkeley Chapo is probably my favorite thing to go and cover water with because I can't find a time of year here that smallmouth just don't hit top water. Like they're
Okay.
just so aggressive, like they're gonna hit it. Um, and you might have to change things up to keep catching them, but you can always get one to roll at it. My second favorite is a spinnerbait.
Huh.
Like you like that was what three of our biggest fish have been caught on. We had a couple 6.5s and we had that 7 pounder spinnerbait. One was a Texas rib, but spinnerbait it was out of two of them. So
That's
my favorite thing.
the spinner bait is probably one lure I use. I probably haven't thrown, it's probably been over a year since I've caught or thrown a spinner bait. I never throw a spinner bait.
You know why that is? Because you know you can catch them on it. I feel like a lot of people don't throw them
Hmm.
because they feel like it's the easy way out. Like I know I can go throw a spinnerbait and catch them, right? I want to catch them on something else.
What are they
But the
foraging on? What are
perfect
they eating?
this time of year, um crawdad.
Yeah,
So they're crawdad colored crankbait. Uh that's money, you know, and that's what we'll throw a lot of. But they'll still hit the spinnerbait. They love moving, they love shiny, they love aggressive. Like
you
the
got
water temperature,
vibration, you got
yeah.
sound, you got everything you want.
And with our visibility in the water, and these are sight feeding fish, you know, coming from up north, the clearer lakes, um, they have to use the other senses here because our water is not clear.
Hey,
So
well, we're
come
coming up on a hard break, brother. When we get back, more with Captain Justin McGrade here on the Captain's Log Radio.
Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss, and with me today, my good friend Captain Justin McGrady. He's a full-time guide in Columbia, South Carolina. Excuse me, Columbia, South Carolina, chasing stripers and smallmouth. And before I rudely interrupted him, my bad, dude, we came up on that hard break quick. We're talking about
all
spinner
good.
baits. And we're talking about what they're eating right now. You know, I like spinner baits. Typically, if I'm going to throw a spinner bait, it's a smaller spinner bait. Never really throwing a big spinner bait. I'll even go as small as like a beetle spin. I catch a lot of largemouth bass on beetle spin. I've actually don't tell anybody. I've caught a lot of juvenile tarpon on beetle spins. I find that they mimic the shad, the little baby shad, or the little glass minnows, or a pack of glass minnows really well. You get a tarpon to eat one, and good luck getting it to the boat, but they'll smoke it. A lot of times they'll just bend that hook, they'll straighten that hook right out. But what I love about that spinner bait style, it's putting out a lot of flash, it's putting a lot of vibration and noise. You've got flash in it, you've got reflection. It's a great bait to put out a lot of just look at me, look at me, look at me. And if fish are wanting something, you said these fish like it moving. They like a bait that's moving. That's a great bait to throw. But you were saying right now you're throwing a lot of jerk baits because it looks like the crawdads.
Well, jerkbait is also good when you get into the colder stretches. Now we've had days up here this in the 70s and stuff like and we've also had some stretches that get down in the 20s at night. So the water temperatures are varying. Not too much, but and also in the river, it depends on the flow and things like that, how fast it'll cool. Um, but the crawdad crankbait, going back to my style, I like to cover water.
Yeah.
And then when we find them, then we can capitalize. Okay, we found them here. And I always remind clients in the boat, try and remember what you were doing whenever you caught it. Because we're a team on the boat. Like, I do not know all the answers. That's the first thing I tell anybody that gets in my boat. I don't know all the answers. I will talk to you and like rely on you. Like, we'll work together and find the right answer out to move forward. But I only know what I know. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's just what I know. And
And
I'm
to
always
add to
learning.
that, yeah, to add to that, even if you have it figured out, this is the hard part being a full-time guide. Even if you have it figured out and you're excited, you're confident, then you get there with your clients and it changed. The fish decided to move. Maybe it's a Monday and all the weekend warriors got out over the weekend and they smashed them. And the fish were like, whoa, we got to get out of here. These fish will move spots. And so, as full time guides, yeah, we know a lot because we spend a lot of time on the water, but you have to have a, a game plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. I mean, all the letters of the alphabet because when you get there, they might move. And the power fishing that you're talking about can be crucial. We're gonna fish hard. We're gonna catch, we're gonna catch, we're gonna catch, we're gonna cover water. And then once we find those fish, then you can slow down. You can hone in and do exactly what
Right.
you just said. Think about what you were doing and mimic that. And
That's
those
right.
fish replicate it. You're gonna once you figure out what they want, you just keep replicating, and you're gonna be replicating success.
That's right. And people ask me all the time, like other local guys, like, how are you staying on the fish? How are you? The only most honest answer I have, and I give it every time, I move. I do not I do not expect the fish to do anything that I want them to do on that particular day. I go into it and I learn to fail fast. So if something's not working, we adjust. And you can break it down however you like. The way I like to do it is I'll break it down on rocks and we'll throw a certain bait on rocks. Okay, we're not getting any hits. Let's move to wood laydowns and cover with current, or
Hmm.
maybe a bend or a break. We'll focus on that for a little bit and then we'll move. But we're moving miles, you know, covering these different areas. And eventually we are going to figure them out.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are those days, like we experienced, hammering the stripers right before you come. And then I'd called you because we had that big rain, and I was like, I knew that was going to change. Our water level changed 5 feet before you got there. So, like,
Yeah.
we're fishing completely different water, and we were able to adjust, not as well as I would have liked, but we still came out on top. So, I
Well,
mean,
let's set the stage here. You set me up with an incredible Airbnb right on the water. Had a boat ramp. You met me. You brought your boat to the Airbnb. We launched the boat right there at the water at the house, and it was beautiful. Like
oh yeah,
we're talking, think about a beautiful river, trees on either side. It was
60 acres
gorgeous.
of privacy.
We were the
Yeah.
only ones on the water. I only saw a handful of boats, and that was not till the afternoon when we got to downtown. And we worked our way up this winding river. We were on the Congaree there. Worked our way up the river there, and fished at certain bends where there's water flowing. Uh, Fishing timber, fishing fall downs, lay downs. That's not something I do often here. I don't have that kind of structure here. There are certain areas around in Central Florida that have that, but I don't have a ton of it. And then we transitioned into downtown where we got to the Broad and then met the Broad.
The
And
confluence, yeah, where we're in the Saluda and the Broad mix to form the Congaree.
that's
Yep.
where you're starting to get a lot more rocks, a lot more white water. We went around a couple of different bridges. It was beautiful. And we went from two different settings, but it was beautiful. Um, and we were power fishing, throwing a lot of swim baits, big
Yeah.
4 or 5 inch swim baits with jig heads on it, which can cause you to get stuck in the rocks and you can break off. You're going to go through a little bit of lead, a little bit of tackle, but covering water, waiting for that thump. And that
Yeah.
first thump, I think I got the first bite. I got thumped right at the boat, like smoked it, but
Yeah. You
missed
were
it.
off that right corner.
Yeah, the fish like missed it. I was at the boat, like it was coming out, it was getting ready to be out of the water.
And
And I was like,
then,
"Oh
and then
man,
I pulled
I
a quick
missed
one
that
on you.
fish." Yeah. So but you were ready. You made that cast and you brought that bait right back through. And I mean, I can't prove it, but I would put money down
It was the
that
same fish.
it was the same fish because he's probably like, "Whoa, like I wanted that. Where did it go?" And then a few seconds later, here comes another similar presentation. We were using the same baits.
Well,
One
those
deep
DOA
cut,
swim baits
smoked
were
it.
freaking killer. One,
Yeah.
like, and they're tough. So, like, I guarantee you, he grabbed his tail and you felt that tug, but he didn't get the hook in him. So, like, he wasn't upset. He didn't go anywhere. And then, boom, I come right back through with the same bait and he ate it.
Yep.
Um,
Exactly. And
yeah,
so you made
that was
that cast.
exciting.
He
And I
came
thought we
up,
were on. I thought we were on.
and it was a beautiful fish. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I was really happy for you, but I was like, dang it, man, I want to catch one of these fish because these things are gorgeous, dude. And
I
they
was
put up.
sitting there in my mind, I was like, we're on. Like it's just gonna be like where I left it. Like the water conditions haven't changed anything. But see, we had something going on at that time that may have been historical. I'm not 100% on that yet, but DNR reached out to me about that.
Hmm,
And we had so many herring or shad come up the river for a spawn that year.
yeah.
They shot shad from where we fished above the top ridges all the way past 77, which is 5 miles or more. Like they were sending me pictures of like, are you seeing this? There was so much bait in the
Hmm.
area at the time that we were fishing. You remember filming that? They I put
Remember?
you on the bank.
Yeah, remember we went to the bank. Did you guys order lunch or something?
Yeah, we
Order
got
some
lunch. Yeah,
subs?
yeah,
And so
we had some
we
Grubhub.
yeah, we beached the boat. Not really beached it. We just tied it to a tree right on the side. There's a sidewalk right there on the river. And there's
Yep,
like an amphitheater or something and some public
yep.
restrooms
The
and
West
people
Palmdale
walking.
Riverwalk. Yep,
There you go. It's the river walk. And along that sidewalk, there was a ton of bait. It was very reminiscent of a mullet run here in Central Florida. Like there was just shad
you could
everywhere.
take your hands and scoop them onto the bank. It was
Yeah.
so thick.
Now,
And
are
that's
those American shad or hickory shad? What kind of shad are those?
no, those are your thread fin.
Okay, okay.
And so because of that, though, imagine like a striper sitting behind a rock. He doesn't have to move very far to eat.
Yeah,
So why would he chase him? I don't care how good your presentation. We literally had to smack those fish in the face to
yeah.
get them to bite. And that we had a that was our challenge. Man, honestly, I think we did pretty good because of that. I mean,
Yeah,
we're competing with a lot of threadfin shad they had
yeah.
to choose from. And so
And
I give it up to DOA on that one.
that is a big deal down here with the mullet run, is you've got millions of baits. And these tarpon and snook, like the one behind me, which we're going to talk about later, um, these fish are so focused in on these baits, and there's so many of them that you really have to stand out because otherwise you're going to get lost. Your bait, your lure is going to get lost in a sea of natural bait, a bunch of baits. From
Right?
there, we ran up to the dam, which was very unique for me. I don't think I've ever, that's not true. I have fished, but from shore at a couple different dams, like in Tennessee, and but that was a unique experience because it wasn't little. There was a lot of water flowing by, but was something
Yeah.
that was unique about it. You would throw your bait and hit the dam wall. Now, that doesn't sound right, but actually the wall of the dam,
Yeah.
and there wasn't a lot of flow there. So you would tell me like, give it a second and then start working it back. And those fish would lay up on that wall
Yep.
and to be out of the current. Think about the baits flowing over, they're able to go in there and grab it. It's like a little eddy for them to kind of hang tight, and then they see the bait and they come and grab it, and they can come right back. That way they're not exerting a ton of energy to get that food. Hey, we are quickly again coming up on our next break. I'm so thankful to have my good friend with me, Captain Justin McGrade. He's out of Columbia, South Carolina. So when we get back, more Captain's Log Radio talking about striper fishing with my good friend, Captain Justin McGrade. We'll talk soon. We'll be right back.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. And with me today, Captain Justin McGrade. Before we get back into the conversation, if you are watching on the screen, you're watching the video of this radio show, you'll see behind me is my personal best 40 1/4 inch snook. I caught that fish with Captain Max McKinley down in Stuart, Florida on a $3 croaker. We went and bought like 100 $3 croakers so we would make sure that we had enough bait. But that fish was made for me by the wonderful New Wave Taxidermy there in Stuart, Florida. If you are looking for a release mount, guys, listen, when I picked this thing up, I was afraid I was going to get pulled over by the police. They'd see this fish and think I had an illegal fish because it looks so real. These aren't just like slapped together. They are handmade fiberglass fish replicas. They have over 5,000 molds. They're all hand painted. If you provide a picture and a measurement, they will make an exact replica. Doesn't matter what kind of fish, freshwater, saltwater. If you are wanting a replica mount for your catch of a lifetime, reach out to my friends at New Wave Taxidermy. That thing is amazing. So go check them out on Instagram. Go check them out on their website. You will not be disappointed. My good friends, the Kirkharts over at New Wave Taxidermy. I absolutely am blown away by this fish. So, anyways, Justin, we moved over to the dam, and I caught a fish I've never caught before. We hooked up to a few of them, and what was cool about these fish, what's very unique about this area, like you've got running water, okay? These fish
Well,
are
we see it as running on the surface, right? It
Yeah.
looks fast on the surface, but there's so much structure and so many eddies and things that could created underneath that, like, you learn that from experience.
And there's a lot of places for these fish to pop you off, but these fish are pulling hard. And we caught a couple blue cats. I've actually never caught a blue catfish before, and so to catch one of those, I was and on artificial. Think about catfish, people think about chunking. At least down here, you're throwing live bait or cut bait to catch catfish. But man, I don't care. This thing was giant. It was beautiful, and it was just
fun.
There's a ton of fun.
I was so upset whenever I found out you had not caught a blue cat and you had that big 40 or 35 plus pound one on that broke you off. Because I was like, we can go get it, or like I can pull the anchor and we could like go and chase it down, and I do what I do, or we could just break it off because it's just a catfish because we saw it rolling. And then we broke it off, and then I realized you had never caught one, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like we should have went and got that fish because that was a 30 plus pound fish, easy. Like it was.
I wasn't gonna. Well, when the next one ate, I was like, "Yeah," because when you get that fish to the surface, you have a whole lot better chance of getting that fish to the boat. Because when they get below the surface, like you talked about, there's those rocks, there's eddies, there's things for them to grab onto. And break you off when they're up high.
The pure weight of them turning sideways in water that's moving 15 mile an hour.
Yeah.
Like You can't really control a 30-pound plus fish when it decides to turn sideways and go with current, you know?
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
saw
it's
his
not even
head.
rock at that point.
I saw his head get up in the surface. I'm like, fish, I'm gonna pull and I'm gonna keep you up here and I'm gonna crank as hard as I can because I do not want this fish to come off. And we got to the boat and it was cool. And our camera guys, one was with us on the boat, and the other two were actually on the shoreline. And one pulled out his long lens for a photo, and I'm just like grinning ear to ear holding this
Oh
fish
man.
out. It was cool, man. It was really cool.
Oh
From
yeah.
there,
It's
we
awesome.
left the dam and we power fished several places. We moved around and we finally settled into our last spot. And what I love about this, it actually made it this clip made our best of for the season finale. Because it was we had grinded, okay, we had caught fish, we put fish in the boat, but we were looking for a specific fish. And you were on the front of the boat, you were on the left side, I was on the right side. I was casting in front of me because the current was going away. So I wanted to cast up front to let that bait drift down along the rocks on the shoreline. And you had, so I was looking, kind of like if 12, if the nose of the boat is 12 o'clock, I was looking like 1 o'clock. And you happened to turn to your right, and about 3 o'clock, you saw something splash on the surface that was just different,
What
just
you
different.
remember, I had the anchor rope in my hand because I had literally said we were about to move.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I heard something and I turned around real quick and I said, "What was that?" And then you cast it directly the direction that we heard it,
Yeah, you'd
and
said cast right
you
over
got
there.
bumped. You got bumped immediately, and so we knew like, okay, we're on something. And then yeah,
Yeah,
you
I
take it
got
from
bumped.
there.
And there's rocks in the water. There's structure in the water. And I said and when we were fishing, that was different. That was different. That was not a rock. And the lure even felt different. So I reeled it in. Sure enough, the lure was all twisted where the fish had like grabbed it, but it didn't get the whole bait. So quickly I readjusted my lure, made a cast in the same zone, hit the water, flipped my bail, pop, pop, boom, fish on. And that fish didn't short strike it. That fish ate it. He wanted to eat
So
and
so
kill
I'll tell you
that
something
bait.
about your twisted lure, right? Stripers are known to go up and tail slap. They'll smack the bait, stun it,
Huh.
turn around and come back and grab it. Now, I don't
Huh.
know if they turn around and all that. They'll if they don't necessarily want it or they're investigating or whatever, maybe pressure, who knows. But they'll go up and play with that bait. They'll kick it and then eat it. So
Huh.
that first one might not have been a short strike. It could have been. It could have been him just running into it and stunning it, or and then want to see how it plays out. And I've learned
Interesting.
that to where if you feel that and you just let it dead drift, sometimes they'll pick it back up. Um, but I mean, with everything happening so fast, I mean, you
Yeah.
reeled it in. We saw the bait did get hit by something. It wasn't a rock, like you said, because that is one of the toughest things going from non-current to current in a rocky, structurous river is getting those bumps on those rocks. You will set the hook on every rock, and I'll tell
Yeah.
people on the boat, hook sets are free. And I will not make fun of you for a fake hook set. Like
Oh, that's right.
because if you don't hook set when you should have hook set, man, I'm gonna ride you.
Yeah.
Then tough skin
Absolutely.
comes out.
Yeah. Well, that fish came back and smoked it. And I knew the way that fish was pulling and fighting that it was a good one. And I don't think I even seen the fish. And I was like, Justin, get the net. Justin, get the net. We're gonna get this fish in the boat. And when we saw it, oh man, I got goosebumps now talking about it. It was gigantic. This was a massive, and the crazy part is they get bigger than that, but it was a big, big striper. Fat
And
fish.
it was a male full of sperm that pre-spawned, so he was just freaking loaded. It looked like whenever he came out on the deck that he was going to pop. Like
Yeah.
you were
Yeah.
like gently holding him and moving him because he was so fat. His scales looked like they were separating.
Yeah. It was awesome. You know, the sun was getting it was the end of the day. Sun was starting to set. It was getting chilly. We started out wearing a ton of layers, and throughout the days it warmed up, we lost layers, and then we were starting to put layers back on because it was getting cool in the evening. And we got that fish to the boat, and it was just like, man, we worked our tails off today, but it was worth it. That moment right there from you spotting, seeing something, to me making the cast, getting thumped, and then making another cast and catching that fish, dude, that was awesome. It was all about the drive. And I said that. I said that in the narration. You know, if you want to be successful in the fishing business, okay, if you want to be successful as a guide, if you want to be successful as a recreational angler, okay, you know, there's the type of recreational anglers that just want to go out there and soak a bait and chill. And that's fantastic. Then there's the type of guys that want to go out there and they want to have the utmost success every time they get on the water. And the only way that's going to happen, whether you're recreational, your tournament, or you're a guide, is drive, pushing through, nonstop action. Like you got to be focused because if you're not paying attention, you're not going to learn. If you're not focused, you're going to miss fish. You got to have that drive that keeps you going, even when the fishing's tough. But then it makes it like, whoa, that was awesome. That was worth it. That was sick. It's the same way when we're tarpon fishing. You get to an area and you see 100 tarpon rolling and they're just amped up and they're not eating. They're eating, but they're not eating anything you're throwing. And you have to pull out the tackle box. All right, I'm going to start with this 3-inch swim bait. I'm going to start I'm going to transition to a shrimp. I'm going to go bigger. I'm going to get a swimming mullet. I'm going to get, you're going through your arsenal. You're pulling out every arrow out of your quiver, trying to figure out what these fish want. And then once it happens, oh, bro. Oh, man. So cool. So stinking cool, man. You have such an incredible fishery. Man, it's very unique, unlike anything I've ever fished before in my life.
I'm very blessed. I mean, and I never took it for granted. Growing up here, my dad raising me on the river. I'm a third generation. My grandfather, and then my dad, and then me. Like we've all fished that river together. I've learned from them, And I was like a normal child. I'd hear them talk, and I wouldn't listen, and I'd like, oh, well, I'll show you how to catch them, blah blah blah. But really, I was listening. I knew the deal. Like my dad, still to this day, hands down I can never outfish him. I have outfished him, but that's because I'm out there every day. Okay. I learned everything from him. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing without it. So I'm very blessed. He's always told me how unique our fishery is. And I've just grown to be more educated about it and learn more about it. And I, I stay a believer. I want to protect what we have. That's the hardest part,
Well, when we get
learning how to
back,
navigate it.
I want to talk more about your special estuary, about these freshwater striper, the history of that. This is Captain Jonathan Moss, is the Captain's Log Radio. We'll be right back.
This is the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.
Hey, welcome back to the Captain's Log Radio. I'm Captain Jonathan Moss. With me is Captain Justin McGrade, the South Carolina River Guide out of Columbia, South Carolina. Justin, I love fishing with you. I love your estuary, and something really special is these freshwater striper. Please give us the rundown. Tell us the history about these fish, because most people think about striper being a saltwater fish, but there are areas throughout the country that have freshwater striper. Give us the rundown.
Yeah, so the way that I know it, and then I've been working with South Carolina DNR, our striper biologist, Jason Bettinger. I probably aggravate him more than I should because I know I can get the right answers and I can learn from him. And I've read reports and this what I know now is not the story I was told growing up. That's how crazy it is here. How many people don't know how unique our fishery is? But essentially, what's happened is back in the 40s, whenever they built Panopolis, which is the dam in Santee that connects the Moultrie to the Cooper River, right? Um, that is what landlocked these stripers because they were bayfish, Charleston, saltwater, the anadromous fish. They live in saltwater, but they migrate up the rivers to spawn in freshwater. There's theories that these fish, weren't like the ocean travel fish that would migrate up north to Maine, like Chesapeake, things like that. They didn't make the huge moves like they do the big ocean fish. These are riverine striper. Um, and you can get really dive deep in those details. But essentially, when they built Panopolis back in the 40s, they landlocked the fish because they were on their migration run. And ultimately locking the fish into freshwater only, they weren't able to get back to the salt water. Well, years later, I can't hear you.
Did people know that these fish were here to spawn?
Well, not at the time, right? So what happened is whenever they started catching them in the lakes, Tiny Lund, I think is the NASCAR driver's name in
Right.
1955. He came down here. He was number 55 on the car, uh, or maybe he changed. I don't know how that worked out, but he caught like a 55-pound striper
Whoa.
or this massive fish, right? Um, and that's what really blew the fishery up. And they started bringing in all these anglers and stuff. But it used to be like crappie fishermen or brim fishermen or whatever down in Santee, and they'd have these little rods, and they were just getting yanked out the boat. And then you had all these river monster stories and stuff circulating. All these old men telling folk tales. Um, but what it was is the stripers, they thrived. They started naturally reproducing and they stayed. So when they landlocked them after the dam was built, nobody knew that until later, 10, a day later or so. Well, when DNR got involved, there was a doctor, his name Dr. Robert, I can't remember his last name, forgive me. We'll try and get that out. But he observed that these fish were naturally reproducing and living in fresh water. So they started studying them, and after another decade or so, they started putting them into Lake Murray, test running, seeing if they could put these hatchery fish in Lake Murray, and they survived, and they did. So then you get into the 70s, and the 70s is when they ramped it up, and they started putting a lot of striper in Lake Murray, Hartwell, places like that, local to the area. And then it advanced to where they started selling them to other states. So that's why we're the freshwater striper state today, because we took
Wow.
our DNA strands and we sold them to other states with freshwater reservoirs that were deep in herring lakes or whatever that had the forage to support these fish because they eat a lot. They don't sit still. They're not like a largemouth. They're always moving. They're a migratory fish. They're built for it. Um, I've been told they can cover 240 miles in a day and not even break a sweat. So it's 10
Two.
mile an hour for 24 hours straight and not break a sweat.
Oh, holy cow, man. That's
That's
serious movement.
that's what they can cover. I mean, and that's a
Hmm.
walk in the park to them. If they turn the afterburners on, that little fishery we're in, where you're covering 6, 7 miles, they can do laps in it, right?
Yeah.
And that current doesn't bother them because they have channels underneath that the current breaks and behind the rocks. It's like a walking down the sidewalk for us. So to get back on topic, to round it up, that's what makes us a freshwater striper state. We sold the fish to other fisheries and other states, and then those lakes are still sport fish today. Like guides make a living off of striper in other states. It all derives from this river system. back in the 40s.
Now you said they're gone right now. When do they typically leave and when do they typically come back?
So they come back. I start fishing for striper in February. I start guiding and advertising. Now I'll have a few select people that'll come early. Those trips are your hero trips. You're going to come out a hero or a zero. Like it's not a numbers game, but the ones that we're going to catch in February are going to be the ones you brag about, the ones you send to mama and take pictures of and get measurements and all that. No, it's a rare occurrence. But you get into March, April, May, and then they leave in October. So they come up, they spawn, and they'll do some really erratic movements. Being migratory, they'll move up and down, up and down. They'll follow the bait, and that spawning habit, you know what's on their mind, so they're just not really in the right sense. It's hard to judge what they're going to do. But
Hmm.
ultimately, what they do is they spawn, and then they use the Saluda River coming out of Lake Murray as a thermal refuge, that colder water, because that Congaree in the summer gets really, really hot.
Huh.
They don't like that. In Marion and Moultrie downriver, they're not deep lakes, 40, 50 foot. They're not a deep lake. So water temperatures there, even though they can survive in it, they will go down there. That's what makes us really unique in Columbia is our fish get big because of the thermal refuge they have coming out of Lake Murray, and we have rainbow trout in that fishery. So that's a delicacy to them. They freaking
Yeah.
love rainbow trout. Oh my gosh. Could you imagine being a striper and coming across an 8, 9 inch rainbow trout? Of course, you're going to get 30, 40 pounds, 50 pounds. I mean,
That's
it happens.
that's what's happening in California. I don't know the name of the lake, but they're catching 20-pound largemouth and they're throwing a bait that looks like a 1 pound rainbow trout. And they're catching these like I wouldn't throw something that big, but that's what they're doing. And they're catching these jumbo largemouth bass. So big bait, big fish, I guess, man. I know elephants eat peanuts, but man, that's crazy.
I mean, I'm not a believer in that. My biggest striper on the fly was caught off of a 2 inch little streamer that was some off colored chartreuse that
Hmm.
I just randomly throwing. So, I mean, you got to be there to catch them. That's the number one rule.
Yep. Yep.
Put the
Yeah,
time
big catch
in
right
and you'll
on.
get rewarded.
Now, when they're leaving, where are they going? When they're migrating away.
So when they leave Columbia in October, you know, range, they move back to Lake Marion and Moultrie. And they tend to stay in that area. DNR has some tagging that's shown that they go into the Cooper,
Hmm.
which they have a stocking program now in Charleston that they're trying to, revitalize that fishery down there and bring it back to life. But mainly our fish stay in fresh water. They go back to the lakes through the winter, basically following the bait.
Wow. Awesome. It's funny is the next day we left Columbia early in the morning the next day and drove to the Charleston area, got to the coast, um, McLennanville, and fished with
Well,
Captain
fluke.
Steve. Yeah, Captain Stephen Fluke Jr. And I actually caught a saltwater striper that day. So I caught my first striper ever in freshwater with you. And then the next day caught my next striper and it was in complete saltwater, which is really cool to do both of those in South Carolina. Two different styles of fishing, for fishing in this moving water like whitewater rapids to fishing the flats and catching a striper both days.
Well, if I have enough time, I got to give a shout out to Dave Flad, who's
Yeah,
also in Charleston, a friend of Fluke. The release over 20 and I strike hooks and all them, right? He tags his fish that he catches in the Cooper. And guess where some of his fish have shown up?
yeah,
In my fishery. So
yeah.
they've gone through the locks. The fish that he's released and tagged in Charleston have
That's
come
awesome.
all the way to Columbia.
Yeah. Uh, Dave Flad is the founder of Release Over 20. We've talked about Dave several times on this show, and then we've talked about him on the TV show several times. He's a great dude. If you're not familiar with Release Over 20, Check out releaseover20.org. Incredible the statistics that you find, the fish that are being released, how many eggs from these females that we're saving because we're releasing these fish, which is just an incredible thing going on with Release Over 20.
And they have a striper line now because it is very important in our fishery, the fish over 26 inches be released because those are the mature fish that can actually lay eggs. So to keep us natural reproducing, that's vital in our fishery.
And I want to hit home, these are not hybrids. Okay. We're not catching a white bass and a largemouth mixed together strain. Okay. We have those here, our sunshine bass, our hybrid bass. These are legit stripers in freshwater in Columbia, South Carolina. Captain Justin McGrade, thank you so much for being here with us today. If people want to find you, how do they find you on social media? What's your website? How do they get a hold of you?
Well, it's easy. The SC River Guide. You can find me at the scriverguide.com and on Instagram, the SC River Guide. YouTube, we're doing a little bit there. I'm a little slack on that, but hey, look me up, call me, we'll talk fishing, and hopefully we can go fishing.
Hey, it was so great having you on the show today. Go check out my good buddy, Captain Justin McGrade, if you're ever in the Columbia, South Carolina area. This is Captain Jonathan Moss. Thanks for listening to the Captain's Log Radio. So thankful to have you. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Captain's Log Radio with your host, Captain Jonathan Moss.